Design Leader Insights is brought to you by Fuego UX. Fuego UX is a leading UX research, strategy, and design consultancy. Hey, Erica, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Hello, good to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your journey in UX?
Sure. So I've been a web designer, design consultant in New York for most of my career. So started off in the era where you could kind of do it all, and then came to focus on UX as I realized I cared most about kind of what was going on the screen, where, why. And again, development, it was definitely its own specialty, and visual design branding was becoming its own thing. So
Nice. And then where are you at now?
went back to my own consulting practice, but I've worked at various agencies and some different tech companies throughout the years. But yeah, 4D Thinking Studio is where I'm trying to spread the word.
Sweet. And you're also a teacher, is that right?
Yeah, I'm teaching a summer class at School of Visual Arts. That's in July 16th in person. So that's a good 5-session intensive where we get to kind of work together. And then I'm also launching online I have had online classes on Skillshare, but I'm going to have a 4D thinking class on Maven shortly. So
The main thing I want to talk about is your book. That's awesome. Your book's out. Tell us about that. Tell us what it's about and what made you write it.
yeah, so it's called Think in 4D. And so the thesis is that even professional designers, we get really stuck on the 2D layers where we see these things in front of us, and we just kind of maybe get stuck there, analyzing the UI and analyzing the colors and the branding. And so we can start to advance by thinking more in 3D, which is where people start to learn about inclusivity and usability and personalization and all these sort of the nuance of real world design. But the thesis is really that this overlooked layer is often the 4D, what I call the 4D layer, which is these relationships that you're creating with the user, with the patterns that happen over time, with the specific paths that they're taking, and then the memories, the moments that they have, because they don't remember every little detail and every little word, but how you create some sort of a flashbulb moment that they'll actually remember.
What are some examples of that you point to when people are like, well, who does a good job of that?
That's a good, yeah. I think it's anybody that's really, trying to start with user journeys, proper kind of mapping. And I think thinking for those high points and low points. A project I did last year with an agency called Runyon was this company called TrueCar, where they had this whole car buying experience online. Yep. And wanted help improving it. And as we talked, we did a ton of generative user research and saw that people were just stuck for sometimes months because they couldn't get to those points of even knowing what they wanted. They couldn't, much less deciding which model, which specific new or used car they were going to buy. And so again, it was number one, identifying even the moments that they needed to get to, and then creating kind of the UI that made that feel magical and wow, I did it. I got, I know what I want. It was so that was one where I was happy to be a part of it. And it was something where we were you're not saving people hours, you're saving them months. It could be really major. Yeah.
And so how can design teams and design leaders, how do you tell them in the book to actually begin a practice around this? Because it's so easy for design leaders to just get stuck on the next, thing in the product roadmap or the next thing in the backlog.
Yeah.
How do you evolve to thinking about the users in the way that you're reporting?
Yeah. Well, one of my other, big hills I will die on is reducing the fidelity. That going back to these old school kind of low fidelity ways of working, so that you do have the time to explore more options and think a little bit bigger and a little bit messier, and just see what a piece of paper can let you do versus oh, well, we can do this super hi-fi mock-up and use AI even and have it done fast, and not realize it's not really solving a user problem, and it's not really, again, as innovative as it could be. So I think that step one is just how you're approaching the problem. But within the rhythm of big tech companies, I think sometimes it has to come at your annual team retreat, that you take some time and you do some ideation sessions and you kind of really take a pause to zoom out a little bit. That's just really hard when you're just trying to get stuff out week after week. So I think, building in those pauses to kind of think a little bit more deeply would be the way to start. And then again, the agency I was working with while I was writing the book, they started to be well, that's not 4D thinking. So I was it starts to work over time as you start to remember these kind of invisible pieces more and more often. But I think at first you kind of have to drill in a little bit.
I like that. I want to talk about, um, like, I think it's great in practice, and I think it's needed. It's absolutely needed with all the software we use. But then you see things like this week, Adobe is now being sued by like the DOJ or something for dark UX, for not letting people unsubscribe, for the opposite of a moment of delight and a delightful UX. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's this conflict, that is sometimes seen at big companies where, let's actually trick the user, or let's get them to add something to the cart that they don't need, or subscribe to something that's like helping revenue. But ultimately, once the user consumer realizes that, they're kind of taken aback.
Yeah, I think that, well, two things come to mind. One is kind of there can be a huge focus on just KPIs and these metrics that,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard. Yeah, designers at big companies are just, again, given assignments to just move this metric. And it's very detached from like, your understanding of the user needs. And again, it could, there are win-win solutions. Again, I think that's what we're all looking for, is things that make the business sustainable and also like, make the audience happy. But yeah, like that kind of focus on metrics, and maybe they're not, the right metrics to be chasing, is something that's really hard.
Yeah, I think that's true, because I think like thinking in 4D involves a little bit of thinking long term, thinking beyond the next quarterly profits, that next
Yes.
KPI. I mean, like,
Yes.
who's a company that, I've really enjoyed these experiences for a long time. And I think it's like such a good investment, because there's so many alternatives to so many consumer products now, right? Like, I'm a Spotify person, I'm an Apple Music person. Like, there's
Yeah.
things in those experiences that keep people on one side. And if you think long
Yeah.
term about that versus, hey, let's triple the price next month, like, yeah, I think there is a lot long term part of 4D thinking, um, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. And also, yeah, just the detachment from like design and strategy sometimes. That again, strategy of like the bigger picture thinking is sometimes like sitting over in product. And so again, the
Yeah.
executional stuff is a little bit, I think we forget how hard it is just to keep communication, like decent communication with everybody at a big company. It's like everybody's constantly kind of unaware of what other people, like essential work that other people are doing. So I think it's a challenge. Again, I think these big companies, it's a lot more about people issues as much of like the conceptual issues. But yeah, I do think, back to the dark UX patterns, it's again, well, how, what was the rationale? What was either the metric or the design principle or the approach that was like leading to that being the decision? Like I was just talking to a friend who said, um, a lot of industries are freaking out about, social media crashing right now and like AI replacing like all these different sites. And so they're focused on email newsletters as like a core thing of like, just get the numbers up, like get more subscribers, get more subscribers. But now they're finding after a couple of years of that, they've got very low quality lists. So
Yeah.
now it's like they're sending out stuff and it doesn't resonate with half the people. And so now they're having to kind of circle back and be like, well, wait, it's about engagement. It's about like, how do you get people like when they get something in their inbox that it's actually good. So I think that does speak to this relationship, right? It's not just like the number went up, we have more subscribers, we're doing great, but it's like they like us. It's a much better
Yeah.
metric.
Much
So
better, Patrick. Yeah.
yeah,
They're happy. They're not stuck with us. They actually chose to be with us. Yeah.
yeah,
Totally,
yeah.
totally agree. I want to switch gears to, advice you have for new designers and or researchers that are looking to enter the field today.
Yeah. I think the big one is kind of what I mentioned earlier about like, maybe working in low fidelity, that I think designers, yeah, as you start to master the craft and, and at junior levels, that is kind of what you're responsible for, is much more of the executional stuff. But it can be, I think with my students, the biggest barrier I see is just getting to attach to your first idea, right? You're just like, I got one, like, or in love, it's perfect, And so it's really hard to like go back to the void and go back to like, wait, there's so many different ways this could be done, which could also inform your brilliant idea.
Erica, where can people go to find the book and your course and all those fun things you're up to?
Thanks. Just thinkin4d.com is the book. And then my Substack is the same. Instagram is the same, thinkin4d. Or they can follow me on LinkedIn if they're hanging out there. Yeah, I'm trying to release like some templates and things along with the book. I've been doing some like free workshops through Creative Mornings. So So yeah, that's all kind of announced on those different channels if they're curious about this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Erica, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thank you. So enjoyable. Thanks.